Уважаеми господин Президент на Република България, Ваши превъзходителства министри на Сърбия и Черна гора, Ваши превъзходителства представители на различни държави, партньори на България в днешната конференция, уважаеми представители на неправителствения сектор, уважаеми дами и господа! Благодаря ви, че сте тук и се радвам на големия интерес, който предизвиква днешната конференция. Своеобразна кулминация на усилията на българското правителство да изпълни със съдържание годината на действие в рамките на втория съвет на върха, международна инициатива, глобална инициатива, инициирана от президента на Съединените щати и в която България прие важната и отговорна роля да води работна група, която да постави под въпрос и да намери решения на темата за противодействие на корупцията като фактор, засягащ националната сигурност, суверенитета на всяка една от нациите и стабилността на региона. Казвам региона, защото България се концентрира да покани и е дълбоко благодарна за това, че се отзоваха страни от региона, разбирайки, че корупция има навсякъде и нито една демокрация не е имунизирана от нея, но че и корупцията има различни проявления и различни причини в различните региони. В рамките на този съмит ние се постарахме да покажем какво сме направили, но най-вече да се организираме така, че да направим още повече и занапред. Благодаря много на неправителствения сектор и особено на Базелския институт и на Центъра за изследване на демокрацията, на Фондация Фридрих Еберт и на всички други неправителствени организации, които помогнаха не само с организирането на днешното събитие, но и във всекидневната работа, която доведе до него. Резултатите от събитието и от цялото период ще обсъдим във втората част, но преди това позволете ми да дам думата за приветствено слово на президента на Републиката господин Румен Радев.
Уважаеми господин министър, уважаеми министри, Ваше превъзходителство, дами и господа, за мен е особено удоволствие да приветствам участниците в днешната конференция, както всички вас в залата и всички тези, които са онлайн. Искам да поздравя Министерството на правосъдието на Република България, което пое ангажимента да организира именно тази тематична работна група по изключително важен за нашите общества проблем. Спомням си, президентът Байдън, преди да организира този самит for Democracy, имаше среща с лидерите на страните от Източна Европа. И той поиска нашето мнение за това как виждаме заплахите пред националната сигурност. Именно тогава той изрази своята идея, че включвайки всички аспекти, предизвикващи националната сигурност в съвременните общества и особено в нашия регион, корупцията, освен че подкопава благосъстоянието на гражданите, тя е и заплаха за националната сигурност. Съвременната корупция има широк международен характер. Именно за това е и напълно навременна тази конференция и тази инициатива. Защото само заедно в сериозно сътрудничество, взаимодействие, обмен на информация, обмен на полезни практики, доказали се, ние можем ефективно да се борим с това негативно явление на нашето съвремие. Бих искал да благодаря на страните и организациите, изразили интерес да се включат в днешната конференция. И високо ценим вашето доверие, ще се постараем да разработим, да осъществим съвместно една разумна и ефективна програма за действие. Сътрудничеството между държавните институции, нестопанските организации и академичните среди е ключов фактор за успех в борбата с корупцията. Затова позволете ми да изразя своята признателност към Базелският институт за управление и към Центъра за изследване на демокрацията, които са наши партньори в рамките на работната група и заедно с Министерството на правосъдието са съорганизатори на днешното събитие. Ще бъде полезно в началото на конференцията да очертаем някои аспекти от политическия контекст, в който тя се провежда. През лятото на 2020 година, след продължителен период на натрупване на обществена нетърпимост към корупцията в управлението, ограничаване на свободата на медиите и ниско доверие в независимостта на съдебната власт, в София избухнаха протести с искане за оставка на управляващата коалиция. Протестите продължиха повече от 2 месеца и изразиха категоричната воля на българското общество да отстоява демокрацията и върховенството на правото като свои ценности. Последвалата политическа криза все още не е намерила трайно решение. Той изисква не само съставянето на стабилно правителство след неколкократни предсрочни парламентарни избори, но и провеждането на комплексни реформи за противодействие на корупцията по високите етажи на управлението. Протестите в България от лятото на 2020 година имат своите национални особености, но те се вписват в една по-широка тенденция за нарастване на предизвикателствата пред демократичните държави както в Европа, така и пред САЩ. В европейски контекст, още в края на 2019 година при встъпване в длъжност на комисията фон дер Лайен, укрепването на демокрацията и върховенството на правото бяха посочени като основни приоритети. През декември 2020 година Европейската комисия представи своя план за действие за европейската демокрация, който включи мерки за насърчаване на прозрачността и честността в изборния процес, укрепване на медийната свобода и противодействие на дезинформацията. Комисията започна да публикува годишни доклади за състоянието на върховенството на правото в Европейския съюз като превентивен механизъм за ранно сигнализиране и интервенция, когато някоя държава членка се отклонява от ценностите на Съюза. Върховенството на правото беше включено като един от факторите, които имат решаващо значение за достъпа на държавите членки на Европейския съюз до финансовите инструменти за преодоляване на икономическите последствия от пандемията COVID-19 по плана за възстановяване и устойчивост. През 2021 година президентът Джо Байден обяви своята инициатива Среща на върха за демокрация, посредством която се цели укрепване на устойчивостта и съпротивителните сили на демокрациите срещу предизвикателствата на съвременния свят. България взе участие в първата среща и заяви ясно своето желание да допринесе за това според своите сили и възможности. В рамките на процеса, започнат през декември 2021 година, бе поет ангажиментът нашата страна да модерира работата на една от групите, тази за антикорупционните политики като гаранция за национална сигурност, стабилност и суверенна политика. Междувременно агресията на Русия спрямо Украйна показа необходимостта от отстояване на силата на правото в глобален план в противовес на правото на силата. Войната показа, че рисковете пред демократичното управление и пред националната сигурност са свързани и тази връзка се изразява в двойното значение на доверието. От една страна, в съвременния сложен международен контекст, доверието между държавите членки на Европейския съюз и НАТО е по-важно от всякога и се превръща в решаващ фактор за гарантиране на стабилността и сигурността в Европа и света. От друга страна, вътре в отделните държави не по-малко важно е доверието на гражданите в способността на националните институции да изпълняват своята конституционна мисия. То именно е сърцето на демокрацията. Тъкмо това доверие и това двойно измерение на проблема с доверието мотивира необходимостта да преосмислим както нашата представа за рисковете пред националната сигурност, така и нашата представа за ролята на демокрацията. Вярвам, че в днешният форум ще начертаете нови пътища за противодействие на корупцията и за укрепване на доверието на гражданите в институциите, а оттам и за укрепване на демократичните ценности. С тези думи откривам конференцията и ви желая ползотворна работа.
Благодаря ви, господин президент. Уважаеми господин президент, господа министри, Ваше превъзходителство, I will now switch into English. When CSD was invited by the Ministry of Justice to co-lead that cohort, it was the ultimate idea of how we could actually make change happen. CSD does believe in the triangulation of our work on anti-corruption, and I think today's forum confirms that belief. I was asked in the morning by the Bulgarian National Radio, what is the positive? How do you deal with a captured state with anti-corruption? And that was my answer, or at least I wish that was my answer. That you have to have reformist policymakers, strong civil society, and dependable partners, trustful partners, international partners. And I think this is exactly what the Summits for Democracy brings in. And I'm very happy that today we actually have with us the person who was organizing the first summit, Shanti Kalatil, who will speak a little bit later, and whom I think we should all be thankful for us getting in there. But we also have examples, and we will have examples, of specific actions in the region and in member states that show that despite the threat to our national security that state capture and anti-corruption bring, there are very positive signs. One is the regional anti-corruption initiatives. The governments in the region do work on anti-corruption collectively, and that is important. Here in Bulgaria, despite the political instability, we have seen, and I'm happy to co-lead this cohort with Minister Zarkov, we have seen that even a caretaker government can take the reform further with the package that was proposed and partially voted, and I see that it will be voted in the next parliament for sure, that has at its core anti-corruption. So I think this is very, very important that we come together in that sense. But let me also mention, before giving the floor to our distinguished panelists, let me also mention the two channels that we've seen have been the primary source of corruption, strategic corruption, as vulnerability to our collective security. After the war, after Russia's brutal war in Ukraine started, I think everybody turned their attention to that. But these have been there for many, many years. And you have in your folders our latest analysis, which shows that in the Balkans, illicit financial flows are twice larger than the average for the world. And that tells us something, that we need to be extra careful. How do we get our investments? How do we get the interaction between the private and the public sector? And secondly, it also shows that we have been swept with disinformation before and after the start of the war in Ukraine. And that disinformation, in many cases, has been widely distributed by our mainstream and, in particular, social media in the different countries. With that, let me thank again the core leaders of the cohort, the Ministry of Justice and the Basel Institute of Governance, and of course our regional partners from the Southeast European Leadership for Development and Integrity, and give the floor to this year's co-organizers of the Summit for Democracy, or representatives of the co-organizers, the Chargé d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Sofia, Andrea Brule Rodriguez, for her introductory statement. Andrea.
Good morning, everyone. President Radev, Minister Zarkov, Ambassador, colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here today at this auspicious event. Our State Department's coordinator for global anti-corruption, Richard Nephew, regrets that he was unable to attend today's event, but he did pass along his best wishes for the cohort, and he has issued a statement that we will put online today. I have been here in Bulgaria for almost 2 years now. During my time here, I have witnessed Bulgaria withstand tremendous challenges. The COVID pandemic with enormous human and economic repercussions, the war of aggression next door in Ukraine, driving refugees from their homes and reminding us again of the destructive power of autocrats. Energy challenges, including price hikes and natural gas stoppages. Despite the geopolitical challenges abroad and the political uncertainty at home, Bulgaria has proved resilient and has remained a committed partner and ally. Bulgaria's resilience reflects what President Biden has said about democracy. Democracy can at times be fragile, but it's also inherently resilient. It's capable of self-correction and self-improvement. Democracy is hard, but it remains the best tool we have to unleash human potential and defend human dignity, and to solve big problems. That is why we continue to champion democracy. Champion democracy is the core idea behind the Summit for Democracy. President Biden envisioned an event where we would bring together countries around the world, despite our differences, and we could all agree on a vision of a world grounded in democratic values, transparent, responsive, and accountable governance, rule of law, and respect for human rights. Towards that end, in December 2021, President Biden held the first Summit for Democracy, which kicked off a year of action by participants to make democracies more responsive and resilient. The second summit, which the United States will co-host with the governments of Costa Rica, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, and the Republic of Zambia next week, will give us a chance to highlight how democracies deliver for its citizens. Bulgaria made 3 commitments at the first Summit for Democracy: strengthening the independence of the judiciary, increasing the accountability of the Public Prosecutor's Office, and safeguarding media freedom and promoting citizens' trust in institutions. While Bulgaria has not yet achieved these commitments, it is very encouraging to see the Ministry of Justice and other institutions of government and civil society push to make those commitments a reality. We have faith that the next Parliament will finish the work left uncompleted by the last legislature, passing the long-delayed judicial reform legislation tied to the Recovery and Resilience Plan, reforming key institutions such as the Office of the Prosecutor General, the Anti-Corruption Commission, and the Supreme Judicial Council, so they are accountable to the citizens, and ensuring that the reforms are sustainable for the long term. As we have said many times, change must come from within, from Bulgarian politicians showing courage and commitment, and from citizens demanding accountability from their government. The United States, as your friend, your partner, and your ally, stands ready to assist with these efforts, whether it's through capacity building, technical assistance, or other tools that can help shine a light and incentivize changes. As part of our efforts, we have taken steps to make it harder for corrupt actors to exploit the U.S. financial system. We have, over the last 2 years, designated 8 Bulgarians under the Global Magnitsky Program for their involvement in serious corruption. These designations are not targeted at the Bulgarian people, nor are they targeted at political parties. They are sanctions of individuals who we assess stole hundreds of millions of dollars of the public's money. But those individuals are part of a larger system that needs to be reformed. Bulgarian citizens have been demanding that reform for years now. We are encouraged by Bulgaria's desire to show leadership in the region by hosting this cohort focused on anti-corruption and national security. Corruption holds back the great potential that we see in Bulgaria and other countries in the region. Corruption disincentivizes foreign investment and takes money out of the pockets of regular citizens. It increases social mistrust, making it easier for hostile actors to spread disinformation and weaken cohesion. In this way, corruption becomes a national security issue. We are encouraged to see Bulgaria and other countries of the region come together to share best practices for strengthening the rule of law and develop common strategies for countering corruption. We hope that the action agenda developed by this cohort will spur coordinated action by the nations in the region against corrupt networks and their corrosive transnational illicit capital flows. As always, the United States stands ready to support these efforts. I wish you all success in this endeavor, and I look forward to working together on these important issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. It's great that you reminded us that the democracy is still the best forum out there to govern our societies, and we've been always thankful about the checks and balances that we have inbuilt, seeing also what authoritarianism looks like, you know, with Russia's aggression in Ukraine, but also knowing and understanding that actually we didn't have the tools to change that course of events because Russia has been moving into that authoritarian streak for many, many years, and actually we weren't able to prevent that. So part of our mission today is also think about practical tools, but also how we could actually engage with this country and protect our own citizens from that. And now I'm really happy to give the floor to the other co-host of this year's Summit for Democracy and good friend, Ambassador Simon van der Burg, Ambassador of Netherlands to Sofia. Simon.
Уважаеми господин президент на Република България, уважаеми министър, ваши превъзходителства, уважаеми гости. It's a great honor for me to attend this forum on anti-corruption and national security. It takes place just days before the Summit for Democracy, a worldwide event organized at the initiative of the United States. A summit focused on promotion of human rights and combating corruption. The Netherlands is a co-host of the Summit for Democracy for the broader European region. Prime Minister Mark Rutte will chair a special session focusing on media freedom. In this context, please allow me to focus briefly on this major pillar of our societies. Media freedom and freedom of expressions are preconditions for a well-functioning democracy. Quite often, journalists are the first to discover and report on corruption cases, security threats, and important developments. At the same time, free and independent media are under pressure in many countries, sadly also in the European Union. Repression is increasing, judicial barriers are installed, and journalists are sometimes dealing with threats and harassment. The digital era creates new opportunities. You can receive all the news on your mobile phone, and everyone can play the role of a journalist at an instant. The digital era also poses new challenges, such as disinformation and fake news. That we have seen over the past year during the terrible war unfolding in Ukraine. This makes the freedom of expression and quality journalism more important than ever. Our media must be able to report without fear and provide us with reliable information. This is essential for understanding the world we live in. Nowadays, linked internationally as they are, media can also play an important role when it comes to matters of security. Allow me to give you a recent example. A week ago, a famous Bulgarian journalist and leading investigator at the Netherlands-based collective Bellingcat was praised in the eyes of the world. At the stage of the Oscars, Mr. Hristo Grozev received worldwide recognition for his contribution in the awarded documentary Navalny. A few months ago, in December last year, Mr. Grozev was announced as wanted by Russia for his work. Many brave journalists around the world risk their lives every day. Our governments and all stakeholders are tasked to improve and safeguard the digital and physical safety of journalists and people who speak out against misuse of power. There are many ways to do that, but it all starts with a common understanding that we can only be free as long as our media are free. As the Netherlands, we are supporting freedom of expression and the safety of journalists through the Human Rights Fund and through multilateral organizations. We are supporting emergency funds for journalists at risk, both online and offline, and supporting legal defense funds to assist journalists who face criminal charges for doing their work. All of us should work towards adopting legal and regulatory reforms protecting the freedom of expression and effectively countering hate speech, online harassment and disinformation online. And we should continue fighting impunity for crimes against journalists, the guardians of our democracies. Sadly, the use of slaps as a weapon against democracies are not uncommon. Recently, Bulgarian media has been slapped with an unprecedented lawsuit of 1 million leva. This demonstrates that more needs to be done. We can do this together for the sake of our democracies and for the sake of our freedom. Благодаря ви за вниманието. Merci.
Thank you so much, Simon, for making this very, very important point. And really, I hope that these slaps there will go away with the help of the Bulgarian judiciary. Now, I understand that the president's schedule doesn't allow him to remain more, but Mr. President, thank you so much for being with us, for joining us for the opening. And he has asked to excuse himself, and he will leave us now, as I understand. But thank you so much, Mr. President, for joining us. And I'm happy to now give the floor to Jacques Paparo. Thank you.
Уважаеми министри на правосъдието, Ваши превъзходителства, уважаеми експерти, дами и господа. As the resident representative of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Bulgaria, I would like to welcome you to this meeting in Sofia. I would like to thank everybody for taking part in this meeting here in this place, and a lot of people online, I heard. It gives us a wonderful opportunity to exchange experiences, knowledge, and points of view, how to fight corruption in an effective way. Governance that is based on a clear separation of powers and objective judiciary, anti-corruption measures, guarantees for the implementation and protection of human rights. Freedom of speech. Altogether, this is the essence of democracy
its pure form. Successful counteraction against state capture in Bulgaria can only be achieved through consistent and coordinated efforts by government representatives, civil society, and international partners in all the areas that are relevant for national development and national security. This is the reason why the Friedrich Ebert Foundation office in Bulgaria has for many years been promoting the democratic development as well as supporting citizens' participation in public processes and helping to encourage the rule of law and good governance. The democratic development in the countries of Southeastern Europe, especially in the past 2 decades, has been positive in general. But let us not forget, we need to keep working and improving. Bulgaria is on rank 78 in the Corruption Perceptions Index by Transparency International. We have similar results in the neighboring countries. As a consequence, the democracy itself seems and is in fact not strong enough, not resilient enough. And as we know, corruption is a serious global problem. Therefore, an effective fight against corruption must be fought on a broad front and must involve individual governments taking independent steps, but also a series of concerted actions with many different countries. For this reason, I want to emphasize the importance of the cooperation between the countries of Southeastern Europe. Since every country has already taken measures, they can profit from each other by exchanging best practice examples. The aim is to develop and coordinate together future anti-corruption politics and strategies. The coordination needs to be realized on the one hand between the countries in Southeastern Europe, and on the other hand within the countries between public entities and institutions and the whole civil society. Therefore, I'm glad we have today the opportunity to discuss this highly important topic. And as a post-communist country committed to enforcing the rule of law, Bulgaria is in an excellent position to be an informal leader in the region. I'm convinced that through today's forum and follow-up actions, Bulgarian institutions can demonstrate their determination to be active. And to finalize, let me adapt a famous quote from Martin Luther King. I have a dream. I have a dream to live in a country where corruption doesn't exist anymore. Thank you. Благодаря ви за вниманието.
Thank you so much, Jacques. Indeed, a great quote, and of course, you reminded us that it's very, very important that we remember. Anytime we see Friedrich Ebert Foundation, it's always good to know that democracy is also around the corner. Now it is my pleasure to also note, and sorry for not doing that earlier, that we also have an online panel. And before we move to the keynotes, I would like to give the floor to the president of the Basel Institute of Governance, our valued co-hosts or co-organizers of this cohort, and that is Peter Maurer. Peter, I hope you can hear us, and I hope you can come online. I think it's nice that you as our partner, you're closing this opening session, and then we'll move to the keynotes. Peter?
Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair, honorable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's my distinct pleasure to address this distinguished audience of political leaders, policymakers, and practitioners that have gathered in Sofia. I wish to start by thanking the government of Bulgaria for bringing us together and for leading this important cohort on anti-corruption policies in the context of the Summit for Democracy. The Summit for Democracy had kickstarted valuable discussions about the challenges that lie at the heart of some of today's most pressing global issues. This engagement is particularly welcome at a time when multilateralism is under severe stress. At the Basel Institute, we are appreciating the fact that corruption has been recognized, I would say finally recognized, as essential to this debate. For too long, corruption has been treated as a technical problem to be solved by experts and often limited to development context. By putting corruption squarely at the center of the debate about global peace, security, and stability, we are finally recognizing its global dimensions, and we are acknowledging that technical solutions are not enough, but rather need unwavering political leadership at the highest level to stand a chance to reduce the devastating effect that corruption has on our world. And this is what is important about today's meeting. Firstly, that it is bringing together political leaders from countries of the region to commit to implementing more effectively anti-corruption policies. And secondly, that the countries represented today are committed to working together in the region and with countries from across the world. Corruption is not a problem of the few, and it is not only a local phenomenon. I would like to briefly reflect on the example of Bulgaria, with which we worked for over a year now on strengthening its anti-corruption policy framework. In line with its aspiration to join the Schengen area, the Eurozone, and OECD, we have seen important multi-party efforts resulting in the adoption of a Whistleblower Protection Act, as well as numerous other initiatives which are underway. As we commend Bulgaria for these important efforts, we need further discussions on the way forward and how to leverage anti-corruption measures for a more equitable distribution of public resources, better quality of public service, safer roads, healthier businesses, and ultimately higher trust in our public institutions and in the fundamental principles of democracy. At the same time, I want to emphasize that adopting laws and policies is not enough. It's the implementation gap that has been slowing us down and which should be the focus of this gathering. What does this mean? We need to resource the responsible agencies properly. We need to ensure they can operate independently and without interference, and that staff do not have to fear reprisal or intimidation for doing their jobs. Beyond that, it is vital that we implement the policies transparently and that we give civil society and the media the space and information that they need to be critical partners and play their role. We also need to bring the private sector more prominently into our discussion, and I'm glad to see that we have a session later today dedicated to collective action and private sector engagement. The best chance to growing our countries is through clean investments, fair competition, and evidence-based innovation. The anti-corruption cohorts under the Summit of Democracy are an excellent illustration of the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement to combat corruption. The leaders of the two cohorts that we have supported, Bulgaria and Moldova, have both demonstrated foresight by reaching out to partners from civil society and academia in the very early stages of the year of action. In Bulgaria, this was the case with initial partners from the Office of the Prime Minister and now with Ministry of Justice and our esteemed colleagues from the Center for the Study of Democracy. In Moldova, we have had the privilege of working alongside the Office of the President and the National Anti-Corruption Center, together with our long-standing partners from Transparency International. In both cohorts, we have engaged in a truly collaborative effort. I would like to express our sincere thanks to our partners for this. With the Basel Institute on Governance, we remain committed to working with partners in building resilient networks against corruption and thus pathways to a safer, more prosperous, and more equitable future. Once again, let me express our appreciation to the government of Bulgaria and our partners for bringing us together today. I wish you all fruitful deliberations and look forward to hearing back from my team on the ground how we can take commitments forward into action. I thank you very much for allowing me to address you today.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you also to everyone that joins us online. We will now conclude with this first opening session, and I'll ask our dear panelists, maybe Minister, you might wish to stay, but the ambassadors, Andre and Simon and Jacques, if you could step down, and we invite our next panel of keynotes, Shanti Kalatil, the Ministers of Justice of Serbia and Montenegro, and the head of the Secretariat of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative. Thank you so much for making this happen. I think this is today we both have, as Peter mentioned, we have the policy part or the policy panel first, and then we also have a technical discussions in the afternoon, so that we could complete or conclude the whole discussion. Just a small technical break. It is now my great pleasure to start with a friend and a colleague with whom we've done a lot in terms of researching malign foreign influence, corruption, and also the coordinator of for democracy and human rights of the Biden administration and the National Security Council in the beginning. And actually, we have to thank her for putting together the first Summit for Democracy. And of course, we look forward to continuing our work, because as we understood, I think from everyone's intervention so far, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and we can go up, down, sideways, but we always have to remember that so I hope it's just part of the authoritarian influence, you know, on this stage. So I hope it's not a drill, you know. But Shanti, the floor is yours. I hope there will be no more sirens and we will not have to evacuate outside of this building. But Shanti, good to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that kind welcome, a very exciting welcome. So we'll see what happens next. We'll be ready to run. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm truly delighted to be in Bulgaria for the first time. Благодаря. It's my honor to be addressing this convening of the Summit for Democracy cohort on anti-corruption and national security. Let me extend my appreciation to our hosts, the Presidency and Ministry of Justice of Bulgaria, the Center for the Study of Democracy, and the Basel Institute on Governance, as well as the many others who have been involved in making this possible today. On the eve of the second Summit for Democracy, it is really an opportune time to be addressing these issues. From my vantage point as a member of civil society, as a researcher, and a former government official, allow me to share a few things that I've learned about evolving transnational threats to democracy. Thanks to globalization, technology, and trade, countries around the world are integrated as never before. With that integration can come tremendous benefits: growing prosperity, closer connection between diverse peoples, rising access to information, and expanding freedoms. But it also comes with some risks. And because the benefits have typically obscured those risks, they can lurk in the shadows until they become full-blown threats. One of the most singular transnational threats to democracy is corruption. And our understanding of the ways that it can endanger both democracy and national security has grown by leaps and bounds in recent years. We now know that some corruption goes far beyond petty bribery or petty bribe paying. It can skip across borders, exploit regulatory loopholes, run on unseen networks and through layers of obfuscation. And when it does so, it invariably corrodes the rule of law and invisibly undermines democratic norms, even in the strongest of institutions. Because of this, anti-corruption, as you all know, is one of the core pillars of the Summit for Democracy. In fact, this issue has long been a priority of my former boss, President Biden. Back when he was a candidate, President Biden first proposed the idea of a Summit for Democracy, and he specifically identified anti-corruption as a major theme for that as-then theoretical summit. Indeed, from day one of the Biden administration, we prioritized anti-corruption as a key component not just of the summit, but of broader national security. Shortly after taking office, President Biden issued the first national security study memorandum of his administration. This policy directive established combating corruption as a core national security interest and democratic responsibility. And that directive set the wheels of the different agencies of the US government into motion. In December 2021, the US built on that first policy directive to issue the first US strategy on countering corruption. Now, that strategy contained several elements, but I wanted to touch on just 3 important points that it made today. The first is that by leaving financial and other systems vulnerable to illicit assets through vehicles such as anonymous shell companies, opaque transactions, or underregulated professional service providers, societies based on the rule of law can inadvertently provide entry points for corrupt actors to launder funds and reputations. And that vulnerability can be exploited by authoritarian regimes and their proxies, weaponized to tilt strategic competition in their favor. The Center for the Study of Democracy, a leading organization in drawing attention to this issue, has published extensive analysis on the ways in which Russia has utilized strategic corruption in the region and beyond. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine has dramatically cast a spotlight on this issue. And while progress has been made, we must continue to tackle this complex challenge. Second, democracies must get their own houses in order if they want to tackle corruption around the world. The US has committed to addressing deficiencies in its own anti-money laundering and other efforts, and to working with allies and partners to tighten global regimes and increase information sharing and cooperation. Just over the past month, the Financial Action Task Force has adopted guidance to help raise standards for beneficial ownership transparency. Of course, effective regimes demand effective enforcement. There is a tremendous opportunity to strengthen enforcement and to bolster transatlantic cooperation in doing so. Third, that it's critical to hold corrupt actors accountable. The US, for instance, has developed the global Magnitsky sanctions to target corrupt actors and has encouraged other governments to do the same. Accountability, though, takes many forms. Many of the actions that I've discussed require government initiative, and national security is usually portrayed as solely the domain of states. But tackling corruption as a national security issue requires the active participation of non-governmental actors, the private sector and civil society, as we've already heard from panelists today. The networks that facilitate transnational kleptocracy can best be countered through other networks, like the transnational networks of journalists, researchers, and civil society that track dirty money across borders and bring it into the sunlight. Government action may be necessary, but it is not sufficient. These civil society and journalism efforts elevate the citizen-centered voice and accountability that tackling corruption requires. Now, I must say that it is tremendously encouraging to see that there's quite a bit of innovation in this space. For instance, the National Democratic Institute, on whose board I serve, has helped civil society groups around the world build broader resilience to covert foreign political finance. And it has also developed a new framework for assessments in post-kleptocratic contexts to ensure that spoilers cannot damage the prospects for deepening democratization. And there are countless other creative efforts underway by the groups represented here today. All of this underscores why the work of this particular cohort is so critical. As a platform for cooperation through the development of evidence-based anti-corruption policies and models, it can serve as a spur for collective action, not only during the Summit for Democracy, but beyond. This cohort also helpfully recognizes that public-private partnerships between governments and civil society are indispensable in the fight against corruption. And it highlights that civil society can heighten the ultimate impact of the Summit for Democracy by engaging with governments on their delivery of commitments. Now, it's no secret that these are challenging times for democracy. Indeed, the institutions of democracy are under attack in every region. Authoritarian rulers are rolling back democratic safeguards, constricting freedoms, and universal human rights. And they're often working together to do so. But the demand for democracy remains robust among people all over the world. Because people realize that when they have a voice, when systems are transparent and accountable, this gives people the best chance of a fair shake, as we say at home. As we approach the second Summit for Democracy, I applaud this cohort for taking complex issues of corruption and national security and grounding them in these basic principles. It's through this important work that we'll succeed in renewing the promise of democracy by showing that democracy can deliver. I know that this is quite important to President Biden. I wish you all tremendous success and progress in carrying this critical mission forward. Thank you so much.
Well, it was probably the alarm that blew out my microphone, but there seems to be some construction work going on, and it sets off the alarm, so you could expect more of that, but hopefully not. Thank you so much, Shanti, for spelling out the journey that we are into, and I think we need to understand that it's quite complex in turning what we've seen as a technical issue and what we've seen as a benefit, the globalization and the benefits of globalization, that now we need to also be careful that there are also downsides to that. And actually, the more integrated we were, the more difficult it will be to decouple or de-risk or think of how we could protect our own systems from somebody that is not friendly towards our democratic checks and balances. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Montenegro, Marko Kovač, who came to the invitation of our Ministry of Justice. Mr. Kovač, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear colleague, Minister of Justice Zarko, dear ministers from friendly and neighboring countries, respected excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I wish to express my gratitude for the invitation for this event and give assurances of my highest consideration to all colleagues here present. The delegation of Montenegro is privileged to have the opportunity to be here with you today and talk about something that is always present in our line of work. I believe we can all agree that corruption is a disease and a dangerous one. No country is immune to the existence of some kind of corruption, but challenges each of our countries face on a daily basis call for immediate response and action. It is our obligation to always stand to continuously battle corruption at all levels, no matter how hard this task turns out to be. Modern type of crime knows no borders, which confirms the statement of how challenging our everyday agendas are. Mutual legal assistance was and always will be a strong tool that is in our disposal, and together with strong national anti-corruption policies should serve as quality basis for the adequate response from the governing authorities. This calls for a collective stand of our countries in means of working together in a way that enables fast and effective cooperation. Montenegro is in a process of upgrading the law on seizure and confiscation of material benefits derived from criminal activities, or in short terms, our asset recovery legislative framework. Since the previous law did not provide the necessary result, we moved to pass the law which will allow seizure and confiscation in many high corruption cases even before reaching the final criminal verdict, with confiscation taking place inside a separate civil procedure. Furthermore, anti-corruption agenda must especially target private sector and public procurement sector corruption, as they represent sensitive areas that should be contained within strong national anti-corruption policies. It is necessary to constantly underline the importance of the need to not just adequately punish corruption, but also improve asset recovery as we aim to protect public interest to the highest extent. If convicting corruption is followed by a successful asset recovery, it would lead to a conclusion that sanctions against corruption are dissuasive and that justice is complete. All of our countries have means to tackle corruption and cooperate in the highest level using primarily UNCNC, but also other multilateral agreements and national legislative frameworks, and we have no excuse not to do so to our best knowledge. So, on behalf of the Ministry of Justice and Government of Montenegro, I express our readiness to share our mutual agenda and stand at your disposal to cooperate at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Kovac. It is really a pleasure to have you here, and we hope that despite, again, very similar turbulences in your own country politically, we hope that soon enough Montenegro might be the first country to join the EU. I think we need geopolitically that win. And I'm now very happy to give the floor to the Minister of Justice of neighboring Serbia, Ms. Maja Popovic, for her statement. Ms. Popovic.
Dear Minister Žarkov, dear Minister Kovac, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to have opportunity to be here on this conference. As a Minister of Justice of Republic of Serbia, and I wish you successful work on meeting on the workshop of democratic cohort within a year activities dedicated to the strengthening anti-corruption policies through the public and private partnership. The Ministry of Justice of Republic of Serbia welcomes every opportunity to exchange experience and opinions regarding such an important topic. Corruption is a harmful phenomenon, very destroying for a substance of every state. So its prevention and fight against the corruption without which any state can be legitimized as a state of rule of law. If we understand corruption as a systematic disease, as my colleague just says, it is clear that we can fight against it only by the systematic building a system for prevention of corruption. Therefore, the processing of preventing and fighting corruption is not only one step, but it's a very, very difficult process, must be very organized, and it's often conditioned by the long-term implementation of measures defined by the state through the strategic documents. For several years now, the Republic of Serbia has been the path of the clear goal with firm determination to prevent and eliminate the corruption to the greatest extent possible. We firmly believe that this can be only achieved with existing indisputable political will and all our efforts that can be constantly bearing undertaken with the aim of economic, social, and democratic development of our country, of all countries that are fighting against corruption. It is well known fact that the consequence of corruption lower citizen trust in the democratic institution of the state, causing them to feel they are not equal to each other, which further creates a legal uncertainty, destabilization of economic system and state, and destabilization of security. As one of the most important goals of the Republic of Serbia is to achieve significant progress in prevention and fight against corruption with a full respect for democratic values, the rule of law, and the protection of fundamental freedom and human rights. The Ministry of Justice approached this topic from several different aspects, but equally committed to each. The basic direction of fight against corruption is defined through the revised action plan for Chapter 23, where the subchapter named Fight Against Corruption is an integral part, as well as through the processing harmonization to the regulation of the Republic of Serbia with Greco recommendation. In previous period, the Ministry of Justice also took steps to prevent corruption by drafting the law of amendments of the law on prevention of corruption, which was adopted in our National Assembly in September 2021, with the aim to further alignment with the Greco recommendation. Nevertheless, great efforts are still being made in order to improve the normative framework that regulates this area, because this way is a solid foundation to create and prevention of fight against corruption. In March 2020, the part of fourth round of evaluation, a new evaluation report for the Republic of Serbia regarding the compliance of Greco recommendation was adopted. The report concludes the Republic of Serbia satisfactorily fulfilled 8 out of 13 recommendations, while the remaining 5 recommendations were fulfilled in the meantime by the adoption of judicial laws in February this year, which showed significant progress compared to the previous period. The evaluation report concludes that the overall level of compliance with the recommendation is not longer globally unsatisfactory. Greco therefore decided that the Republic of Serbia should not longer be subjected by the Rule 32, which applies to member states that have been found as non-compliant with the recommendation contained in the evaluation report. Although the Greco report from 2022 undoubtedly confirmed the significant progress of the Republic of Serbia has achieved and fulfilled, but it is not enough in our fight against corruption, bearing in mind that the Ministry of Justice is responsible for the preparation of normative framework and strategy for the fight against corruption. In next period, we will do in our normative work. It is very important to pick up the most important laws and strategy documents, and this is our basis for this fight. This operational plan that we are doing on represent the main basis for development of a new ambitious national strategy for fight against corruption of Republic of Serbia. The preparation of new national strategy for fight against corruption with accompanying action plan, which will be valid in Serbia for a period of 2023 to 2028, it is the most significant undertaking of the Ministry of Justice in the current working in the field of fight against corruption. There is a well-known saying that the best prevention of corruption is strong repression of corruption. That is why the Ministry of Justice is making efforts with equal enthusiasm to strengthen the institutional framework of authorities responsible for repression of corruption. All necessary elements of system of repression of corruption are further improved within the framework of activities foreseen in a revised action plan for Chapter 23. And in the end, I want to thank the Ministry for organizing this event and to call us to share our experience. Thank you very much, dear colleagues.
Thank you very much, Minister Popovic. We, as a regional anti-corruption network, we very often come also to Belgrade, and we look forward to engaging further also with your government in pushing forward this debate and the work also in the afternoon. Now we have to have online our next participant, who is the advisor to the President of Moldova on justice, Veronica Brăduțanu. They are the other cohort that works on anti-corruption. So, Veronica Brăduțanu, if she's online, the floor is yours. Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation and for inviting us. Good morning, dear hosts and dear participants, and thank you very much for inviting us to this event. Allow me to greet you on behalf of Moldova, and thank you for this honor. Unfortunately, the Minister of Justice could not join us today. She is sending her words of encouragement to Bulgaria in its work in promoting democratic values and fight against corruption. We are also very grateful to the United States of America for launching and leading this summit initiative and the support in fight against corruption around the world. Fighting corruption is one of our biggest priorities for our government. This was among the key promises that brought our government to power, and we are doing all we can to deliver on it. Before 2021, as some of you may know, Moldova has been for years affected by systematic efforts to capture it politically, economically, including our judicial, electoral, and law enforcement institutions. But since 2021, we have made important progress in strengthening its democracy and confirming our clear European aspirations with strong popular support. Moldova also obtained candidate status to the European Union and is moving ahead in implementing the steps recommended by the European Commission in June 2022. Still, we are confronted with a number of subversive attempts to divert us from the pro-European course and to try and return the country to a Russian sphere of influence through staged protests, using dirty money and connections to Moscow-based entities. So in addition to struggling with corruption internally, Moldova is also challenged with corruption with a strong international dimension. As some of your honored guests have mentioned today, the captured state and movement of dirty money, these are the problems that Moldova is really struggling with today. Hence, we cannot really fight against corruption without international cooperation, because most of the stolen money left the country, and the criminals who have been involved in these actions are now fugitives. So we have to identify ways to bring them to law and also to recover our assets. In this context, and within the US Summit for Democracy, and similar to Bulgaria, Moldova decided to launch and lead a cohort on anti-corruption, but the one focused on international cooperation for anti-corruption. together with two co-leads, Transparency International and Basel Institute on Governance, from whom we heard today, and we are very grateful to Basel Institute for engaging with us and bringing on board important civil society organizations. This cohort was mainly focusing on international cooperation, since it is vital to investigate corruption cases and recover stolen assets. In the cohort, we had 26 countries and 15 civil society organizations. The cohort collectively agreed on 30 recommendations of key actions in 4 categories, focusing on compliance with international standards, widening their scope, transparent recovery of assets and operational cooperation for purposes of investigating crimes and uncovering illicitly gained assets, strengthening domestic enforcement bodies. We are really glad and proud to see that today Moldova is recognized internationally for its efforts in fighting high-level corruption and pressures from organized crime, thanks to the political leadership and will of our president, Ms. Maia Sandu. I will just say a few words about our achievements on the national level and our priorities. We have 3 goals: reforming the judiciary, strengthening anti-corruption bodies and cleaning up public institutions, and countering illegal financing of political parties. Last year, we set the basis to ensure that Moldovan judges and prosecutors are competent, independent, impartial, by starting an extraordinary evaluation of the ethical and financial integrity of judges and prosecutors and candidates to the self-governing bodies, the so-called pre-vetting, which is going to be followed by a vetting of judges and prosecutors. We also embarked on strengthening anti-corruption bodies and cleaning up our public institution by appointing honest professionals in leadership positions in key anti-corruption institutions. We continue working on strengthening existing mechanisms to ensure accountability and integrity. We have enforced our mechanism of oversight and sanctions to prevent illegal financing of political parties. And we are we have adopted a new electoral code, and we're strengthening the capacity of the Central Electoral Commission to oversee political financing. We're also working on asset recovery framework and confiscation framework, so we'll be very glad to hear about your experience from today, from the workshops, and experience of Bulgaria and also Montenegro, as we've heard, on this work about asset recovery and confiscation. Thank you very much for allowing me to address the distinguished guests, and my sincerest thanks to the government of Bulgaria for organizing this event.
Thank you so much, Veronica. You reminded us of 2 things, and I think that's important. First, the role of the US as the still indispensable nation for this region when it comes to democratic resilience. I think that's important to note. But secondly, the importance of the EU as a force for good in the region. And I'm really happy that we've been able to push the process of enlargement even further. And I hope that there will be a chance to get this galvanized, because I think it's a wonderful process of transformation. And while it's not, as we mentioned, it's not an end goal, it's a very, very important very important journey that we need to make. And let me now turn the floor to what we usually term as, and we usually take the benefit of our countries in the region actually working together, and that's the head of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative Secretariat, Desislava Gockova, who will finish this panel. And as I said, this is where we as civil society work a lot on regional level. Desislava, the floor is yours.
Благодаря. Ваши превъзходителства, дами и господа, скъпи колеги. За мен е изключителна чест и привилегия и удоволствие да бъда днес тук сред вас. Now I'll switch in English. I would like to thank the organizers and the government of Bulgaria and Minister Zarkov in particular for hosting this meeting and permitting RAI to present our perspective on the Anti-Corruption Year of Action and the proposed Anti-Corruption Action Agenda today. But also, I would like to thank them for their continued support and active engagement in RAI. More than 20 years ago, the governments of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Montenegro, Moldova, North Macedonia, Romania, and Serbia established the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative to support RAI member states in fighting corruption through cooperation and coordination of efforts. So I'm very happy to see many familiar faces here today from the government and also representatives of the government. Under the umbrella provided by RAI, our member countries work and implement anti-corruption policies and measures together, which ensures regional ownership and contributes to the sustainability of the results. The thematic areas of our involvement to prevent corruption include strengthening of transparency and public integrity, inspiring the youth of today with anti-corruption education, and highlighting the opportunities available to detect corruption and repression through whistleblowing and asset recovery projects. With the adoption of RAI Work Plan 2023-2025, a new thematic area contributing to stability and peace through building integrity and curbing corruption has been introduced, reflecting some of the key challenges and risks we all confront nowadays. As the only regional intergovernmental organization with a clear anti-corruption mandate, we in RAI will be honored to serve as a resource structure of the cohort. We do believe that our long-standing experience in promoting and facilitating regional cooperation would contribute to the successful implementation of cohort initiatives. Tackling corruption is not a standalone activity. Corruption is a complex phenomenon which requires a complex response. By applying an inclusive and multidimensional approach, the cohort Anti-Corruption Action Agenda ensures that all key stakeholders, civil society, private sector, as well as multilateral institutions, international and regional organizations, are included and contribute to the process of its implementation, thus providing a synergy of efforts. In the last year of action, and in my daily work as a head of RAI Secretariat, I have the honor to meet highly motivated and competent anti-corruption experts and practitioners who are committed to addressing corruption-related issues despite the many challenges they face every day. We have come a long way in the last 12 months. Nevertheless, there is still much to do to make this cohort a truly transformative endeavor for the anti-corruption efforts. I hope that next year we will be able to achieve tangible results and broaden our anti-corruption community by bringing more countries and organizations on board to support cohort initiatives. Finally, I would like to reassure all our members and colleagues that RAI Secretariat remains a committed partner in this very important initiative, and we are very much looking forward to working with you next year and the years to come. Много благодаря за вниманието и очаквам, че ще можем да дискутираме по време на коктейла след това. Благодаря.
Благодаря, Desi. Thank you so much. Indeed, I hope that after we finish today, we're going to embark on what the President mentioned, this action agenda that we might bring together, and that one of the outcomes, hopefully would be a stronger role for RAI and regional civil society networks that we can engage with. Now, we're at the end of this wonderful panel, but we are all going to have an afternoon full of discussions and really interesting interventions. Thanks very much to everyone on the panel. Thanks to Minister Zarkov. I wanted to extend special thanks to Ms. Shanti Kalatil, the former Deputy Assistant to President Biden. And as I said multiple times, thank you again for making this happen, and thanks for taking the time from your busy schedule to visit us. Also in the afternoon, let me just give you a little bit of a preview and an ad to join us after the lunch. We'll have an intervention by Deputy Prime Minister Atanas Pekanov, who will tell us with Minister Zarkov how we've grown accustomed of using EU rules and regulations to actually push forward harder anti-corruption reforms. I think that's going to be an important thing. And also let me highlight the intervention of our great friend and fighter for democracy, Paul Massaro, who is a senior policy advisor for countering corruption and sanctions at the US Commission on Sanctions and Cooperation in Europe. Paul made it here very late last night, but Paul, thank you for joining us, and I really look forward to the afternoon session. We will reconvene in exactly 1 hour, and I believe there is some lunch awaiting for us outside. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to actually taking forward the action agenda that we'll propose to your attention. Thank you. Thanks so much.